The raven had barely taken flight when Eddard Stark found himself staring at the Queen across the sun-dappled gardens of the Red Keep. Cersei Lannister's smile was as sharp as a knife concealed beneath silk. He had come here intending to warn her, to give her the chance to flee before Robert returned from the hunt. But her words had turned the ground beneath his feet to ice. She was offering him something he had not expected, not an escape for her children, but a pact. "You know the truth now," she had said, voice low, eyes flicking to the gold-clad guards beyond the hedges. "Robert will kill them, and me. But he will not harm you. Marry Sansa to Joffrey, keep the realm together, support me, and when Robert dies, we rule together. Your honor, my children's lives." Ned had almost laughed at the idea. Rule together, with the woman whose lies had poisoned the king's marriage and whose brother had crippled Bran. But when he thought of Sansa, of Arya, of the North that would bleed if war came, the laughter died in his throat. He had spent too long in the South to think war was a thing you could start and stop at will. Robert's death would bring blood on the streets. Stannis, Renly, the Lannisters, anyone would grasp for the throne. The thought of Arya running through a city full of knives, or Sansa in Joffrey's cruel grasp without protection, tightened his chest. "You ask me to betray?" "My king," Ned said. "I ask you to survive," Cersei replied, "and to let your children live long enough to have children of their own. I will not pretend I care for your honor, Lord Stark, but I think I can give you what you truly want: peace." The word peace echoed in his mind that night. Sleep did not come. In its place came visions of War-Rob calling the banners, the North burning, the South in chaos. And then visions of something else: the Lannisters holding King's Landing. Yes, but the North untouched, his daughters married into power, his sons safe in Winterfell. The next day he sent a message to Petyr Baelish. They met in the tower. "Of the hand behind locked doors. You were right about her," Ned said curtly. "She'll do whatever it takes to protect her children. I think we can come to an understanding." Baelish's eyebrows rose. "And here I thought you were a man who preferred honor over life." "This is not about my life," Ned said. "It's about the lives of thousands." Baelish smiled that sly, knowing smile of his. "Then you've just made things very interesting, my lord." When Robert returned from the hunt, drunk and roaring about the boar he had slain, the court saw nothing amiss. Ned did not confront him. There was no talk of bastards or the Baratheon bloodline. Cersei stood by Robert's side, her expression as smooth as polished marble, while Ned sat at the council table, saying little. In the weeks that followed, Ned and Cersei began an unspoken dance. He still despised her lies, and she still viewed him as a useful obstacle, but they both understood the bargain. His silence kept her children safe. Her influence kept his family from the Lannisters' wrath. When Robert's fatal hunt came not weeks later, but months, after his temper had worsened and his body grown slower, Ned was ready. Robert's will, hastily written as the king lay dying, named Ned as protector of the realm until Joffrey came of age. The ink was barely dry before Cersei intercepted the parchment and suggested a few amendments. This time, Ned did not resist. The lords of the small council, seeing unity between the Queen and the Hand, bent the knee to Joffrey without a murmur. Stannis was kept at bay with promises of recognition and lands. Renly fled the city but dared not raise open rebellion while the North and the Crown seemed united. Sansa wept when her betrothal to Joffrey was confirmed, but Ned reassured her that with him by her side, the boy would learn to be a better man. Arya did not believe a word of it, but even she noticed the changed Lannister guards no longer glared at her, and the Queen's court ladies treated her with a strange, watchful courtesy. But far away, in Dragonstone, Stannis brooded. In Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister smiled, and in the shadows of King's Landing, Varys whispered to his little birds that the game had just changed, because Eddard Stark, the unbending man of the North, had bent. But peace in the Seven Kingdoms was a fragile thing. It held as long as Robert's blood cooled and the ink on Joffrey's coronation charter stayed fresh, and already forces beyond the wall were stirring, and across the narrow sea. A young girl with silver hair was dreaming of dragons. The coronation of King Joffrey Baratheon was a glittering spectacle. Gold banners fluttered above the Red Keep, the High Septon anointed the boy king, and the nobles of Westeros bent the knee in turn. Ned Stark stood beside the throne, his face unreadable, the sword ice strapped to his back in silent reminder of northern steel. Cersei sat to Joffrey's right, her gaze sweeping over the court like a hawk over a field. The Lannisters had won at least for now, but the victory was delicate. Joffrey, despite his crown, was still a boy, quick to rage and slow to listen. Ned had taken it upon himself to temper the boy's excesses, speaking in quiet tones during council meetings, intercepting cruel whims before they reached the headsman's block. Cersei allowed it, though her lips often thinned when Ned contradicted her son in public. One afternoon, in the council chamber, Petyr Baelish leaned over to Ned. "Your Grace, pardon me. My Lord Protector seems. You've become a father to the boy." "A father he does not want," Ned murmured. Baelish's eyes glittered. "True, but fathers have ways of shaping sons, if they live long enough." It was Varys who brought the first true test of the new alliance. He drifted into the council, meeting one morning with his silken smile and soft hands, speaking of whispers from the east. "A girl with silver hair, sire," he told Joffrey, though his eyes flickered to Ned. "And dragons, perhaps. Such stories are dangerous, for they inspire dangerous men." Joffrey scoffed. "Dragons are dead." "Perhaps," Varys said, "but rumors live. And across the narrow sea, Sel's words can be bought with coin. She is the last of House Targaryen, after all." Ned felt the trap at once. Robert would have ordered her death without hesitation. But Robert was gone, and now it fell to Ned and Cersei. Killing a girl across the sea felt too much like murder in cold blood. Yet sparing her could plant the seeds of another war. That night, in Cersei's chambers, the two spoke in low voices. "She's a child," Ned said, "barely a woman grown." "She's a Targaryen," Cersei countered, "and children grow. If we kill her, we make her a martyr. If we let her be, she might never cross the sea." Cersei studied him over her wine cup. "You are too soft, Stark, but perhaps you are right. Let her live, for now, but keep watch." It was the first time they agreed without argument. Still, Ned left the room with the uneasy sense that in sparing the girl, he might have spared his own doom. Meanwhile, the North was restless. Ravens from Winterfell brought news of trouble at the wall. Benjen Stark had gone ranging and not returned. Wildlings moved in numbers not seen in a generation. There were darker tales, 2 dead men walking, pale as snow. Ned wanted to ride north at once, but Cersei would not allow the Hand to leave the capital. "The boy king needs you here," she said. "Send your sons, if you must." And so Robb Stark came south for the first time, bringing with him a handful of loyal men, and a cold-eyed understanding that his father's bargain with the Lannisters was a game played with poisoned pieces. Robb treated Joffrey with stiff courtesy, but Arya noted the way his hand often rested on the hilt of his sword when the king was near. The court began to split in whispers. Some saw Ned as a steadying force, keeping Joffrey from becoming a monster. Others saw him as a northern wolf, lurking too close to the lion's cub. And in the shadows, Petyr Baelish whispered in ears both Lannister and Stark, fanning sparks that could one day set the realm aflame. One such spark came at the tourney held. In Joffrey's honor, Sir Loras Tyrell unhorsed, Sir Jaime Lannister in a stunning tilt, and the young king was eager to reward him. But when Ned suggested a modest purse rather than a title, Joffrey's temper flared. "I am the king," the boy shouted before the gathered court. "I will do as I please." The moment hung like a sword in the air. Cersei's gaze shifted to Ned, daring him to challenge her son. Ned met the boy's eyes and said evenly, "Then please wisely, your grace." The hall murmured, and the tension eased, but Ned saw the way Joffrey's jaw tightened. The boy would remember that, and far to the east, in the red wastes beyond the Dothraki Sea, Daenerys Targaryen dreamed of a throne she had never seen and of the Northern Lord whose choices would one day decide her fate. The small council met. Under the heavy heat of late summer, the air thick with the scent of the black water's brackish tide. Varys entered last, his soft slippers making no sound on the stone floor, carrying tidings from the north. "The Night's Watch sends pleas." "For aid," the spymaster murmured, laying a parchment before Ned. "They speak of shadows in the woods and of rangers gone missing, and of things that do not die when slain." Ned's eyes swept the letter, his jaw tightening. "These are not idle tales. My brother Benjen still has not returned." Cersei glanced at the parchment and shrugged. "The Watch has cried of wild and ghosts for 100 years. The wall is far, Lord Stark, and our concerns are here." "Our concerns are the realm," Ned replied sharply, "and the wall is the realm's shield." Petyr Baelish leaned forward with a wry smile. "The crown's coffers are not without bottom, but they are without much gold at the moment. Sending men north costs silver we could use for other matters." Ned looked from face to face, reading the political calculations behind each pair of eyes. At last, he said, "Then I will send men from my own household guard. The wall will not be left wanting." That afternoon, Robb Stark prepared to ride for the wall with a small company of trusted men carrying letters of safe passage from the king. Arya stood in the yard, scowling at the thought of being left behind, while Sansa barely looked up from her embroidery. Ned clasped Robb's forearm. "Write me from Castle Black, and watch for things that walk when they should not." Robb nodded gravely. "I'll find Uncle Benjen, or what's left of him." In the days that followed, the court's focus shifted to the politics of the Reach. The Tyrells sent gifts and sweet words, seeking to tie their fortunes to the throne now that Robert's rule was over. Lady Margaery was presented to Joffrey, her beauty and poise winning the admiration of the court and the irritation of Sansa. Cersei treated the girl with measured politeness, but in private she made her feelings plain to Ned. The two have their eyes on the throne, and they'd gladly see my son wed to their Rose. But you've already given him Sansa. That is our bond, Stark. We will not let it be broken." Ned agreed. Whatever mistrust lay between them, the betrothal was the linchpin holding the North and the Crown together. Without it, the South might once again turn its gaze on Winterfell with suspicion or conquest. But while court intrigues twisted through the halls of the Red Keep, a darker thread wove through the city. Whispers reached Ned of a guild of assassins from Bravos, hired to remove a certain councillor whose loyalties wavered. He suspected Baelish's hand, though no proof could be found. When Ned confronted him, Baelish only smiled. In King's Landing, my dear hand, death is often the purest form of negotiation. The fragile peace between wolf and lion began to show cracks when Joffrey ordered the public whipping of a stable boy accused of stealing a loaf of bread. Ned countermanded the order, substituting labor in the royal stables. The boy lived, but Joffrey's pride took the wound instead. That night, Cersei came to Ned's solar. You humiliate him before the court again, and I will not protect you from his wrath, she warned. He is a king, not a tyrant, Ned said. He must learn to temper justice with mercy. He is a lion, Cersei replied coldly, and lions do not temper. The standoff ended with silence, but both knew they had crossed into dangerous territory. Meanwhile, far to the north, Robb reached the wall and found the Night's Watch thinner and wearier than he had imagined. The old bear spoke of fear among the rangers, of wildling movements unlike any in living memory, and of strange pale creatures seen in the haunted forest. Robb wrote to his father that night, but before the letter could be sent, a horn blew from the top of the wall long and low, once, twice, then a third time in the north. 3 blasts meant only one thing, and if the tales were true, it meant that the realm Ned Stark had sacrificed his honor to protect was in far greater danger than the Iron Throne could ever be. The raven from the wall arrived at dawn, its message sealed with the black wax of the Night's Watch. Ned broke it with steady hands, but as his eyes ran over the words, a chill settled in his bones. Robb's writing was hurried, the lines uneven. 3 blasts. The others are real. I ride with the Rangers at first light. He read the letter twice before sending for Cersei. She entered in a silk robe, her hair unbound, irritation in her eyes at being summoned so early. Ned handed her the parchment without a word. She read it and gave a short, incredulous laugh. Ghost stories. Is this why you wake me? Ghost stories do not kill rangers, Ned said quietly. These are the same tales Benjen sent in his last reports. If the others walk again, the wall will not hold without aid. Cersei tossed the parchment on the table. And you would have me send half the king's army to freeze in the snow because of a boy's letter. I would have you understand that if the wall falls, this city will burn, Ned said. Not from wildfire, but from things no Lannister gold can bribe. They argued for an hour, her logic rooted in politics, his in survival. In the end, a compromise was struck. 50 men from the City Watch would ride north as observers under the command of Seer Alliser Thorne, with promises of more aid if the threat proved real. Ned knew it was far from enough, but it was better than nothing. In the weeks that followed, life in King's Landing returned to its dangerous rhythm. Joffrey presided over councils with increasing confidence, though his decisions often bore the sting of cruelty. Sansa worked to please him, speaking in rehearsed courtesies, while Arya avoided him altogether. Cersei watched everything, always calculating, always ready to shift her weight in the game. One evening, during a feast for visiting envoys from Dorne, Baelish slid into the seat beside Ned. News from the Vale, he said casually. Your sister-in-law Lysa grows restless. She fears for her son's claim, with the Lannisters so close to the throne. She has nothing to fear, Ned said. The Vale is untouched. Baelish smiled thinly. Fear doesn't need a reason. It needs a whisper. And she has many. The warning proved true. Within a fortnight, A raven arrived from the Eyrie, its message curt. The Vale would remain neutral. In all southern affairs, it was a blow to the stability Ned and Cersei had built. Without the Vale's open support, their alliance looked less like unity and more like a fragile truce. Tensions sharpened when word came from the Riverlands. Gregor Clegane, acting without clear orders, or perhaps under them, had raided villages. Along the Mummers Ford, Lord Hoster Tully demanded justice. Cersei dismissed the outrage as a minor border quarrel, but Ned knew the Riverlands would not let it rest. In the small council, he pressed for Clegane's arrest. If we do not punish him, the Riverlands will see this as the Crown's doing, and if they take up arms, the North will answer their call. Cersei's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me with your banners, Stark? I am warning you what will happen if you do nothing, Ned said. Baelish intervened, offering to send a royal writ to recall Clegane for questioning. In truth, Ned suspected it was another of his traps, but the alternative was open rebellion. That night, Ned found himself alone in the Godswood, the southern weirwood pale under moonlight. He prayed for Robb, for Benjen, for the Warland, for the strength to keep the peace he had chosen over honor. Far to the north, Robb's company rode deep into the haunted forest. The snow fell heavier each day, and the silence of the trees was broken only by the crunch of hooves and the occasional snap of a frozen branch. Then they found the first body a ranger Ned had known in his youth, his flesh pale as milk, his eyes blue as the heart of winter. The corpse opened its mouth and screamed. The scream was not the sound of a man, but of something colder, sharper. Wrong. Robb's horse reared, nearly throwing him, and the Night's Watch men shouted in alarm. The pale figure moved with unnatural speed. It soared a shard of ice that caught the moonlight. The first ranger to strike was cut down, his steel shattering against the other's blade. Robb fought to steady his breath, drawing his own sword. The old bear had spoken of these things as legends, but here one stood, very real and very deadly. Fire, someone shouted. A lantern was hurled, shattering on the thing's chest, flames leaping, but the others stepped through the fire as though it were mist. It took the heads of 2 more men before Jon Snow appeared from the tree line. Ghost at his side, a sword of black dragonglass in his hand. With a single thrust, Jon drove the blade into the creature's chest. It let out a sound like cracking. Ice then shattered into 1,000 shards. Robb stared at Jon, panting. Where in the 7 hells did you know time? Jon cut in. There are more. They rode hard for the wall, pursued by the dead that did not tire. By the time they reached Castle Black, only half their company remained. The rest had fallen and risen again, their blue eyes gleaming in the dark dot in King's Landing. Ned received Robb's raven late at night. The words were hurried but clear. The others march. The wall will not hold. He read the letter twice, then went straight to Cersei's chambers. She was in no mood for dire news. The North has always had its winter tales, she said. If the wall falls, we will send aid then. By then it will be too late, Ned said, the edge in his voice sharper than ice. We must act now. Send men, send ravens, call the realm to arms. Cersei's eyes narrowed. And hand the south to our enemies while we send our strength into the snow. No, my duty is to keep the throne secure. For the first time since their uneasy pact began, Ned slammed his fist on the table. Your duty is to the realm, not just to your son's crown. The air between them turned to glass. Cersei's voice was low when she replied, Choose your next words carefully, Stark. You may find our arrangement more fragile than you think. The next day, at the small council, Ned presented Robb's letter. Varys listened with a grave expression, Baelish with a smirk, and Pycelle with a dismissive cough. "We cannot fight shadows," the Grand Maester muttered, but Varys spoke up. "Shadows or not, if the North believes the threat is real, they will call their banners. If we ignore them, they may ride south themselves, not to beg for aid, but to claim it." Reluctantly, Cersei agreed to send a token force north, bolstered by supplies. It was not enough, and Ned knew it. But the Queen's mind was fixed on keeping her grip on the throne. Meanwhile, Joffrey grew restless. He saw the talk of the wall as a distraction from his own ambitions. He began speaking of a war against the Vale, of making the Riverlands pay tribute, of teaching Doran its place. Ned fought to temper him, but every victory in that battle was smaller than the last dot. Far to the east, Daenerys stood at the prow of a ship bound for Qarth, 3 small dragons coiled around her arms. She had heard whispers of a northern lord who bent the knee to a boy king, and of a queen with golden hair. She vowed she would meet them both when her dragons were grown. And beyond the wall, the others gathered under the moonlight, their ranks swelling with the dead of wildlings, rangers and beasts alike. The first true winter in 1,000 years was coming south, and no pact in King's Landing could stop it. Snow fell over King's Landing that winter, an omen the city had not seen. In living memory, thin at first, then heavier, it settled in the alleys and rooftops, an unwelcome reminder that the cold was no longer confined to the north. Ned stood at the window of the Tower of the Hand, watching the flakes drift past, when Arya burst in. "They say the dead walk in the north," she said, breathless from running. "Is it true?" Ned hesitated. "Yes." Her eyes widened. "Then why are we still here?" "Because the realm will fall if I leave," he wanted to say. Instead, he told her, "Because we must hold the south while the north holds the wall." It sounded hollow even to him, that same day. A raven arrived from Robb. The wall had not yet fallen, but every ranging now ended with fewer men returning. The others had taken the fist of the first men. Jon Snow had gone missing in the chaos. Robb urged Ned to send dragonglass, steel, food, anything. Ned went to the small council again. The wall is the shield that guards the realms of men. If it fails, there will be no south to protect. Baelish tilted his head. And if we empty the treasury and the armies for a northern frost, there will be no crown to wear in that realm either. Varys, ever the voice of warning, added softly, "The cold winds do not blow for one house alone. The dead have no banners." Cersei finally spoke. "We will send the watch what they need, but the realm cannot be drained for a fight that may never come here." That night, Ned walked the Godswood alone. The red leaves rustled in the cold wind, and he remembered Winterfell, the sound of the weirwood's branches in the snow, the weight of honor on his shoulders. Had he made the wrong choice in sparing Cersei, in keeping the peace? Or had that very choice bought them the little time they still had? In the days that followed, the city itself began to fray. Food prices soared with the snow, and the poor rioted in Flea Bottom. Joffrey, irritated by the unrest, ordered executions in the streets. Ned intervened where he could, but Cersei began holding councils without him, making decisions he heard of only after they were enacted. Then came the news from the Riverlands. House Frey had broken faith with the crown, sealing its gates to royal envoys. Without open rebellion, it was still a slap to Joffrey's rule. Tywin Lannister sent word that the West would march to persuade them back to loyalty. Ned saw the trap immediately. If your father takes the Riverlands, it will look like conquest, not peacekeeping. Cersei met his gaze coolly. It will look like strength. The city grew colder, and not only from winter's bite. Spies reported that the Reach and Dawn were quietly sending envoys to one another, speaking of an alliance against the throne. Stannis Baratheon's ships were sighted off the Stormlands, though no assault came, and in the far north, the wall finally broke, not with a single battle, but with a slow, grinding collapse. The Night's Watch fell back to Castle Black, then to the Shadow Tower. The others swarmed through the abandoned forts, raising every fallen man to join their ranks. When Robb's next raven reached Ned, it carried a single line: "They are coming south." Ned read it in silence, then looked to the map of Westeros on the table. All the lines of politics, all the knots of alliances and rivalries suddenly meant nothing. If the dead came, there would be no thrones left to sit on. Yet when he brought the news to Cersei, she shook her head. "Then we will hold kings. Landing, let the north burn if it must. My children will not die in the snow." For the first time, Ned wondered not if his pact with her had been a mistake, but if it had doomed them all. The raven came in the black before dawn, its feathers stiff with frost, as if it had flown through the heart of winter itself. Ned broke the seal with numb fingers. It was Robb's hand again, but this time the writing was jagged, the words barely legible through the smears of ink. "Castle Black has fallen. Jon Snow is dead. The wall is gone. We march for Winterfell, but they are faster than we are, father. They do not stop." Ned sat in silence, the weight of the words pressing against his chest until he could barely breathe. Outside, the snow in the courtyards had grown thick enough to bury the garden paths, a thing unseen in the south for centuries. By mid-morning, he stood before the small council, the letter in hand. "The north is lost," he said. "Every rider, every sword must be sent north now. The dead will be here before the harvest." Baelish gave a soft laugh, shaking his head. "You expect the Reach, the Vale, Dawn, the Stormlands all, to ride to the aid of the Starks. They won't. They'll guard their own borders and wait for the frost to kill the rest." Varys spoke with unusual urgency. "This is not a northern war. This is the war for all men. If the dead reach the Trident, the South will not have the numbers to stop them." Cersei looked around the table, her green eyes cold as the snow. "If the North has fallen, then we fortify the South. The Riverlands will hold the line. If they cannot, we hold the Blackwater. I will not scatter our strength into the snows to save a land already lost." Ned's voice cut through the chamber. "Every land you abandon becomes another army for them. Every man they kill rises to join their ranks. Do you not understand? The longer you wait, the stronger they become." Joffrey, bored until now, leaned forward with a smirk. "Let the dead come. We have the walls of the city and the might of the Lannisters. If they want my throne, they can try to take it." Ned almost drew ice right there, but the thought of Sansa seated beside the king, smiling with practiced grace, stayed his hand. Instead, he turned without another word and left the council chamber. That night, he summoned the Gold Cloak's commander to his solar. "You will ready the men for a march north," Ned ordered, quietly. "We leave in 3 days." The commander hesitated, and the queen. "She will not approve," Ned said. "That is why you will not tell her until we ride." But secrecy in the Red Keep was a fragile thing. By the next morning, Cersei stood in Ned's solar, to Kingsguard at her back. "If you march those men north," she said, her voice low and venomous, "you march them to their deaths and you leave my son undefended. Your son will die in his bedchamber if the dead reach this city," Ned replied. "Then I will make sure they do not." Their eyes locked, and for the first time, Ned knew the truce between them was broken. That night, he walked the godswood for what might be the last time. Snow dusted the red leaves, and the face carved into the heart tree seemed to watch him with sorrow. He thought of Robb, of Arya, of Bran and Rickon, of Sansa, bound to the Lannisters by a promise that had kept the realm from war, but might yet cost her everything. In the north, Robb Stark reached Winterfell, only to find its gates broken and its halls silent. The snow lay thick over the courtyard, but there were tracks boot prints, claw marks, and the deep, dragging furrows of something heavy being pulled. And then, through the drifting snow, the blue lights came. The blue lights moved like slow-burning embers in the white haze, dozens at first, then hundreds, until Robb could no longer see the far side of the courtyard. The sound came next, not the scream of the living, but the grinding shuffle of ice on stone, the rattle of weapons held by hands long dead. Robb ordered his men to fall back toward the keep's great hall. Arrows hissed into the snow, finding their marks but doing nothing to halt the advance. Each fallen enemy rose again, blue eyes igniting like frostbitten stars. Inside the hall, they barred the doors and lit every brazier they could find. The heat gave little comfort. In the flickering light, Robb's breath came fast, his sword arm heavy. "If they take Winterfell," he told the surviving Watch brothers, "they take the heart of the North. We hold until my father comes." But in King's Landing, Ned Stark was no longer the man Cersei had bargained with. Word of Robb's plight had reached him by Ravenshorter, harsher than any letter before. "We are surrounded." He knew the Queen would never allow him to march, so he stopped asking. That night, he went to Sansa's chambers. She was startled to see him at such an hour. "You must be ready to leave," he said, kneeling beside her bed. "If the city falls, find Arya and ride north to White Harbor. Tell Lord Manderley everything." Her eyes filled with confusion and fear. "What about you?" "I will ride to Winterfell." But the next morning, the Red Keep awoke to chaos. The gold cloaks Ned had planned to take were disbanded on Cersei's orders. The city gates were sealed. And in the throne room, Joffrey sat with a smug tilt of the head as Cersei declared that the king's hand had been relieved of his duties for his own health. That was the last day Ned Stark held any power in King's Landing. North of the neck, the storm broke. The others poured out of the snows, their army swollen by the dead of 100 villagers. Robb fought until his sword arm failed him, until the heat of the hall was swallowed by the cold, until the last sound he heard was the cracking of the great gates. Weeks later, in the frozen ruins of Winterfell, the blue-eyed dead marched south. When the first snows reached the riverlands, ravens blackened the sky over the Red Keep. The letters were all the same, no matter their seal. "They are here." Cersei ordered the gates barred, the granaries sealed, the wildfire readied. Joffrey played at war in the yard, mocking the fear of the lords. And in the Tower of the Hand, Ned Stark sat alone, listening to the wind. He thought of the choice he had made in the gardens months ago, or peace, and how quickly peace had turned to ruin. On the night the bells rang in warning, he took up ice and walked into the snow. He did not know if he would see Robb again, or Arya, or any of his children. But he knew one thing: if he was to die, it would be with his sword in his hand, facing the enemy that had come for them all beyond the walls. The blue lights moved through the blizzard, slow and certain, and somewhere in the dark, a horn blew long, low, and final.